Last week, we introduced the syntax and semantics of two-dimensional arrays, and we also implemented a console application calculating the mileage of some given itinerary of cities. So this week, we'd like to strengthen your understanding by considering more problems manipulating two-dimensional arrays. Specifically, we want to write utility methods and also test them using JUnit tests. So that's something we'd like to achieve this week. We'll go over a number of problems, and for each one of them, you're encouraged to, after seeing the specification of the problem, try it out yourself before you actually go over the solution with me. So that will be what I recommend you actually do. Let's now set up the projects. Let's now create new Java projects, and it will be week number 11. Okay, week underscore 11, and then we say finish. And don't forget, you do not actually want to create the module info.java file. Don't create. Okay, and we don't need any console application this week. That's what we did last week. So under source, we're going to create two packages, one for model and the other one for JUnit tests. So new package, model, and another one here, new, and then class. Oh, sorry, not class, should be package as well. We'll create classes in a moment. New, and then package, JUnit tests. Okay, and then under the model, we just declare one single class called utilities, similar to how we did it before. So new class utilities, and then we don't need a main method here, right? Just a regular utility class, and then all the methods will be static, right? So which means we don't really need to create the context objects in order to call those methods. Right? Let me close that. And then also for the JUnit tests, let's now create a new and also JUnit test case over here. And then make sure you choose JUnit 4, and let's simply say maybe test utilities. Okay, and then we'll say finish, and then make sure we add JUnit 4 to the library path, pretty much like how we did it before. Okay, and then we'll have different tests over here. Let me just delete this one. As soon as we declare the utility method, we'll actually change the name for the test as well. Okay, let's now close it. All right, so now for utilities, the first problem we want to solve in the current video. Let's see the problem. Okay, let's read it together. Given an input to the array of integers, for example, so these are two examples. I'll go over them with you. So return a string displaying its values. So row by row will be one method, and also column by column will be another method. In the case of column by column, we assume that the two-dimensional array input is actually a rectangle. When I say rectangle, I really meant for every array in the second dimension, they actually got the same length. You can see, so this is more like a rectangle shape. On the other hand, remember I mentioned before, in general, the length of each array in the second dimension does not need to be the same. Over here, you can see this. The first array in the second dimension has size 1, 2, 3, 4, but the second array in the second dimension got size 1, 2, 3, and the third one got only size 1. So we are not going to treat this as an input for the second utility method. But for the first utility method, when we print row by row, we can definitely print this one as well. That's pretty easy. So we want to implement these two methods. Okay, before we do that, I would like to declare the methods, utility methods, and also write the test cases first. So that's something I'll really encourage you to do, not just for this course, but beyond this course. Whenever you're trying to implement some method, so there is something called test-driven developments. You want to make sure before you actually code the method details, why don't you specify a test to formulate about exactly what should be achieved, and how exactly it should be achieved. You can code it up later. So that will be something I recommend you actually do. So I will illustrate it to you, hopefully for every problem that we're going to discuss this week. Okay, so how do we print row by row and column by column? We'll get there in just a moment. Let me declare the method first, and then I'll come back to here. Come back here when I need to write the tests. Let's now declare the first method here. Let's say this. So it's going to be, let's say, public static, and then row by row, column by column. So two methods. each one of them is going to return a string. Let me maximize it over here. So string, let's say get print out, for example, row by row. And then what should be the input? Input should be an array, a two-dimensional array of integers. Integer, okay, and then we can call it A. And then we can simply say return, let's say this. I can say string result is simply assigned, initialized to be empty string, and then return the result. Okay, so that'll be the first method. And the second method will be very similar, except it should be column by column. So let me just copy this method here, and then I will code it up in a one by one in a moment. So rather than print out row by row, which is a column by column, so we say COL, standing for column, right? Column by column over here. So you can see the input is really the same, and the output type is also the same, but how we actually achieve it would be different. But before we code up exactly how to return the value, why don't we specify, according to test-driven developments, what's to be achieved? Let me go back to Package Explorer and double-click on Test Utilities class over here. So now we want to test, let's say, let me just say 01, 02, right? So you will see very clearly under the body for the test method which method is being tested. So we will try to only test one method for each test method. Let's now do the first one. Let's now create an input first. So integer array over here, input, right? You kind of remember how to do the, I'm going to assume you already completed week number 10. Tutorial videos about the basic semantics and also syntax for two-dimensional array. Let's now do the first one. You can see the first one will be, you can see we got 4 rows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? And the second one will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and also 8, right? Let's do the 2 inputs in one test method. Okay, so let's say input 1 over here, and then I'm going to have, so you got 1, 2, and 3 rows, right? I could have actually hit enter and also put some indentation to make it more prettified, but you can do that yourself. I'm not going to do that. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, that'll be the first row, and then 5, 6, 7, 8, and then 9, 10, 11, and 12. So this will be input 1. Okay, so how do we write the test for input 1? So you're going to call that, right? So we can say integer. The string is going to return the string value. So string, let's say output 1 is assigned to utilities. We haven't imported that yet, have we? So we're going to say utilities and then control space, and then make sure you import the utilities from the model package and click on that. Or you can enter that manually. You can see that we're going to say import model.utilities, right? So utilities dot, let's say get print out, let's say row by row. So that's the first one, and then we can simply put input 1, right? That's something should be very familiar to you about calling simply invoking methods, getting the actual value, and compare that against the expected value. So what will be the expected value over here? So here we can say string expected 1. So what should be the expected value? Let's take a look over here. You can see here, if we want to print row by row, let me use maybe say row by row, so that'll be blue. So it's going to be in this order. So it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and then followed by 5, 6, 7, 8, followed by 9, 10, 11, 12, right? Kind of in this order. And then for the second array, it's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and also 5, 6, 7, and also 8. Okay, don't get confused about the 2 arrays over here being the same name. I'm just putting there just A, right? Since when I actually put the just easy to identify the array, just say A. Okay. Okay, so now how do we what should we expect to see for the first one? It should be 1, 2, 3, 4 followed by, okay, it will be very similar. So it should be, let's say we want to do this. So we want to say simply comma separated 1, 2, 3, 4, and then second row 5, 6, 7, 8, and then also 9, 10, 11, and 12. Okay, let's say that's the string output we are expecting. You can definitely play with about how the delimiter should be, right? That's completely up to you. So for now, I just use the standard, just curly brackets over here, right? So that'll be this row, followed by this row, and then followed by this row. Okay, and then let's now write some assertion. So I can say assert equals. So this I will compare string against string. So I would say expected 1, and then output 1. All right, you can see I try to just be as clear as possible over here. Hopefully you're following. And we can do the second one in the same test method. We are testing the same utility method, but just for 2 inputs. I could have said maybe 01A and 01B. I could have, but I think a 01 would be fine. Okay. So why don't we simply copy this and then paste it over here. And now it should be input 2, output 2, and also expected 2. So now what should be the input 2? It should be this particular array with an equal length of the arrays in the second dimension. So 1, 2, 3, 4, followed by 5, 6, 7, and also 8, right? That's what we expecting. Let's go back here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? You can see the second array in the second dimension only got length 3. And then here we just want 8. So the third array in the second dimension only got length 1, which is completely legal. And what do we expect to see? Well, actually, I can just call, let me just say this, 5, 6, 7, and then also 8. All right, that's kind of what we expect. So that should be expected 2, and also output 2. So this will be our first test, testing this particular utility method, get printout row by row. Why don't we implement it and make sure it works before we go on to the second one, and then we're done for this video, right? Let's do one tiny step at a time and make sure it's completely sound. Let's go back to the utilities here. Okay, so how do we do this? It will be basically something that we did already, but last week we just printed out to the console. But now this time we want to accumulate the output into a single string and then return it. Yeah, that's the only difference. We basically need a nested loop. I wouldn't really trace specifically about how the nested loop works. That's something I assume is already covered in your weekly lecture. I'm going to include a link in the YouTube description over there. If you really want to go over how the nested loop structure can be formulated using a flowchart, which will definitely help you understanding. If you need it, you can feel free to check out the link. I'm going to put it on the YouTube description. Let's now just write it out directly. Okay, so we're going to use a nested loop, and for the outer loop, it's going to be row by row, right? So it's going to be, let's say, integer r, initialized to be 0, and the r should be less than, how many rows do we have? It should be basically a.length. A.length will be how many? So you can see indices will be 0, 1, and also 2 over here. And then for individual row over here, we want to see how many columns we should really get. For example, how many columns do we have over here? It should be a at position 0, which gives you this particular row, and then dot length is going to tell you how many columns you have, right? That's something we also covered last time. Just a quick review. Right, we're going to generalize it. So what we will do is r is less than a dot length, and then I plus plus. And then in the inner loop, we're going to also for each row, we're going to go over column by column, basically. Okay, so we're going to say for integer c initialized to be 0. So my convention would be r standing for rows and c standing for columns. And then c less than, so less than what, right? Should be a at position, but now it should not be just 0. That'll be too specific. It should be whatever the current row is. So that should be ar, dot length, right? I can trace this maybe a little bit together with you when I compare the two methods together. You will see they're very similar, except that the loop pattern will be different. So that will be the main lesson to learn from this particular video. And then C++. Okay. And then we're going to accumulate it. So what we should do is, first of all, we're going to say result plus equal. So that will be the outermost curly brackets. And also here, we want to say result plus equal the the closing curly brackets over here. And then for individual row, we also need to print out, right? We need to print out like this. We want to say result plus equal, you know what? Let me just do this. Okay, and then I also need that. So this also we need to close the row over here. And then how do we print out the item comma separated, right? We want to say result plus equal. We want to index into the array. So A row R and also colon C. And when should we put a comma? Basically, we want to say something like this: 1 followed by comma, 2 followed by comma, 3 followed by comma, and then 4 should not follow by a comma. So only up to here. So that should be index 0 dot length, and then it should be only up to -2, right? So this index will be the last one being -1. So this should be -2, right? So that's also to do with how you print out comma separated list for one-dimensional array, but which is exactly the same principle, because each row is indeed a one-dimensional array. So we can say if the counter C is strictly less than AR dot length -1, in that case we're going to also put a comma, right? So result plus equal and then comma. Okay, maybe put a space over here, right? All right, I think hopefully that will work. Let's see. I don't know. Let's hope for the best. Is there any compilation error over here? Oh, sorry. There should be R over here for sure. All right, let's now go back to test utilities and then let's run the test. All right, we don't really have that being correct. Let's now debug it quickly. So now let's see which one is causing the which line is causing the trouble. If you double click on that, it's line number 16. Let me just do it again. Let me go back to the JUnit test, and then let me double click on that. It's telling me this one is being violated. Why don't we take a look? Let's put a breakpoint. So it might be a nice point to actually review about how you can debug JUnit test. We haven't done that for quite a while. So let me put a breakpoint here and then launch the debugger. And then switch. Okay, apparently this assertion failed. So what I should do is I should really compare them. Ah, I see. Okay, so if you take a look over here, you can see expected is basically this string value over here. However, what's being returned is something like this. So what's really missing is I don't really have the comma between rows. You can see inside a particular row is pretty well printed as comma separated, but now between row 1 and also row number 2, I don't really have the comma in between. So that's what's missing. Okay, that's a nice catch. So why don't I simply stop over here, and then I'll go back to utilities. Okay, let me now do it. Let me switch also back to Java perspective. Right, I'm just trying to run the whole workflow together with you, just to make sure your is still fresh in your mind. Right, so what we should do is we want to make sure over here we want to say if the current row is not the last row. In that case, we definitely should print out a comma, right? So let's say if the current row is strictly less than, it's very similar to this, but now it should be the number of rows, right? It should be a.length -1, right? Very similar. In that case, result plus equal, comma. So it may not be as trivial as you might think when you want to print out a string, right? But it's not that bad. It's just that you got to pay attention to details. All right, let's now go back to test utilities and then run it. Did I actually, oh, you know what? Let me just check one thing very quickly here. Let me double click. Let me go back to utilities. I think I'm missing the space over here, I thought. Okay, remember we should really put a space after the comma, right? So every detail is important. Of course, if you want to debug yourself, you can also set a breakpoint in the failing assertion and then try to compare the string, like how I did it. Let's go back to test utilities and then run. Okay, it's still failing. So why don't we try to see one more time to see which one is failing? It's now, let's now double click on that. Okay, we're still failing this line. Why don't we take a look? Debug, and then switch. Okay, and then we have output 1 is actually the comma is actually put in the wrong place over here. Oh, it should be after the curly brackets. I see. Okay, let's now fix it again. Stop it, and then go back to Java perspective. It might be nice for you to see why putting this in the wrong place can actually result in a wrong output, right? So I shouldn't really have put this here. I should have put it after the closing of the current row. It should be over here. All right. It's just normal. You may just have to debug maybe a few times before it can pass. That's exactly why you want to do JUnit test. All right. Let's now try one more time. Do that. Still failing. Okay. Let me double click on that. Okay. So here. Oh, actually, what's happening over here is it seems like we are not really putting the right input over here. I think we're supposed to call input 2 over here. It's just a typo. Okay. And then if I try one more time, so now this time we get a green bar. Phew. It's a process, right? And I'm just doing this live, so I didn't really plan. I didn't look at any notes, so just bear with me. So it's now working.